Those of you who pay attention to the Christian liturgical calendar will know that today, the second Sunday before Easter, is called Passion Sunday. Passion Sunday marks the beginning in the liturgical calendar of our paying attention to the last days of Jesus the Christ in his earthly body as he journeyed toward this powerful, powerful experience of all human beings have access to, called resurrection, or called crucifixion, leading to resurrection. So in Charles Fillmore's Keep a True Lent, he has a daily or a word for each Sunday. So it's so appropriate, given what we're about to hear, that we listen to what Mr. Fillmore has to offer for us today. It's called the Overcomer. An overcomer is one who recognizes the truth of his being and is renewing his mind and body and affairs by changing his thoughts from the old mortal beliefs to the new as he sees them in divine mind. He is one who demonstrates the divine law, not only in surface life, but in innermost consciousness. Spiritual power, mastery, and dominion are attained by the overcomer. He that overcometh, quoting the Bible, I will give to him to sit down with me on my throne. The way of overcoming is, first, to place oneself by faith in the realization of sonship. Remember, looking at Dr. Katie's book, realization simply means to make real. And secondly, to demonstrate it faithfully in every thought and act. One of the laws of mind is that man, human being, becomes the one perfect pattern. Everyone desires to overcome all errors. Each should therefore be wise and identify himself or herself with the Christ. No external condition or circumstances can hold us in bondage when we make mental contact with God. It was to the overcomer that Jehovah spoke when, through one of the old prophets, he said, I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten. We have many blessings. Begin to praise God for the abundance of all things. Your words will crack the omnipresent ethers, and good will flow to you from every direction. The work that I have to do as an overcomer for the world is to help establish a new race consciousness, a new heaven and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness. By being true to my highest understanding of truth, I never swerve to the right or the left for any reason. I affirm, I am an overcomer through Jesus Christ, and I rest in the realization of his grace and power. I am an overcomer through Jesus Christ, and I rest in the realization of his grace and power. Let's say that affirmation. I'll say it. We'll break it down so we can all get it. I am an overcomer. Through Jesus Christ, and I rest in the realization of his grace and power. Rest. So with that thought in our background, I'd like to invite Esther and Layla and Jackie to come on up and take a seat while I see if I can get the technology to work. Our overcomers. So everyone in this room is an overcomer. And every one of us has a story that we can share. And so it's my vision and the board's vision that we want to draw on this wisdom that we all have to give members of this congregation an opportunity to demonstrate and to speak truth about what your experience has been, to help those of us, including me, who still need help to remember what's really so. It's in my humanity. I trip, stumble, and fall on a regular basis, but I like to dust myself up and dust myself off and get up, and everyone here helps me do that. So we're going to ask each of these brothers or sisters to share with us for about 8 or 9 minutes her experience on overcoming a particular challenge in their lives. And with the remaining time, I may have some questions I want to ask to help dig a little bit deeper. Every one of them is willing to stay after the service for those of you who would like to know more about their individual experience or what they're doing now or what they see for the future based on their experience. So with that, Esther, would you be willing to start and share what you'd like us to know about your overcoming?
I'd be happy to.
Well, my journey began 75 years ago, but we don't have time for all of that. What I want to tell you about is my healing in my body and in my mind in the last 2.5 years especially. Ben and I took a cruise, not a cruise, but a land tour to Ireland about 2.5 years ago. By the end of that tour, my legs, my knees, my feet hurt so bad, I didn't even think I could make it to the next gate to catch our flight home. So when I came home, I didn't think I was going to die, but Ben told me, he said, "You're going to have to write your own obituary," because I'd never be able to do it. So I sat down, got up one night in the middle of the night, and I wrote my obituary. And, then 2 weeks later, this all started to happen. It was just a miracle. So what happened was I went to the doctor because I had so much pain in my knees I could hardly walk. And he didn't have very good options. He told me that he could give me a cortisone shot in my knees, or he said you could continue taking your pain medication because we had another trip planned for China in September. I didn't like that option either, but the third option he gave me was to have my knees replaced. And that sounded pretty radical. But the real thing about me is I like choices in my life. At that point, I didn't even have that choice because he said, "But you have to lose 70 pounds first." And I thought, oh dear, that would put me far below what I thought was reasonable for me. But I didn't know what else to do. I'd been on every diet in the world, and I am a good dieter. I mean, I know how to do it. I can do it perfectly, and I can lose the weight. But I didn't know the secret, which was how to sustain the weight loss. So at that very same time, divine appointment, my friend Nora, who's here today, she gave me Dr. McDougall's Maximum Weight Loss book. And I thought, I've tried every other diet, I might as well try something new. And I read it, and it made sense to me. And so I said to myself, I'm going to put him to the test. I'm going to follow that plan perfectly, just like if I were a scientist doing an experiment, because then I'll be able to know if I give him the credit for it and if that's what can sustain my success the rest of my life. So I jumped in 100%. It was a radical change, but so was open heart surgery, so was knee replacement, and so is having diabetes, all of which can be cured by eating this way. So I weighed 257 when I started eating this way. I had been up to 282 at one point, and I just jumped in. And, just within a short period of time, it seemed like the toxins were leaving my body. I was losing the weight. And I don't know how much time I have, but anyway, the point is, not only did I achieve the weight loss I've always wanted to lose, for all of my life. For 40 years, I've been walking in the wilderness, wanting to know when I get to the promised land and be well. But the real surprise was that most diets are temporary. We do them to reach a goal. And then we put back into our diet and into our bodies the very food that got us in that trouble in the first place. So we never learn how to surrender certain things forever to maintain the health. So I'm going to jump to the healing. As I went along in my journey, the first thing I noticed is the pain in my knees subsided. And then as things went on, I got to go off my statins. I'd been on statins for high cholesterol. I was pre-diabetic. I had high blood pressure. I had GERD. I had constipation. I had diverticulitis. But I wasn't sick. I was just fat. I mean, I just didn't know how sick I was until I started looking at all of the ailments that I'd had. So one by one, all of the medications came off. And last July, I actually got off my thyroid medication, which I've never heard happening. And I had talked to Claudia one time, and she talked me into envisioning this white light, which I knew nothing about, but I thought, well, it sounds good to me. So I'd be swimming, and I'd just say, white light, wherever you are, come and heal my thyroid. And so I got off my thyroid last July. And then when I started this diet, I was being observed by my eye doctor for an eye condition. It's called a macular pucker. And he said that I was finally to the point where I could have my surgery. And I said, well, I've just started this new way of eating about 3 months ago, and I just have this belief system that if it cures everything else, it's going to help my eyes too, so can I wait? And he said, yes, come back in 6 months. So in 6 months I came back, and he said, well, your eyesight is improving. I said, okay. And he says, come back another 6 months. So I came back, and he said, your eyesight is improving again. Hard to understand how this can happen, but I guess we all do know how it happens. And on December 10th of last year, I went to see him again because he was doing this continual follow-up. And I said, you know what? I said, I haven't been wearing my glasses lately. And I said, should I be wearing them just to protect my vision? And he said, quote, with your eyesight, you do not need to wear glasses. So, I mean, it's just so marvelous. And you know what? It's a spiritual journey, too, because the diet that I follow is the same thing that's been in the Bible for over 2,000 years, Daniel's fast. So, what I did was I gave up all animal products and all dairy, which sounds severe, but you know what? If you want success in your life, you have to pay the price. And I keep telling myself if I had to take chemo, I would take it, but I don't. So that's basically my story.
I'm going to, I got some questions, but I'll reserve it till everybody gets a chance. So thank you, Esther. Layla, I think you might have something to share with us.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm not in the habit of talking in these. Well, my journey began 66 years ago, and I'll give you a brief introduction to that. I probably was born with, but had my first asthma attack at 6 months old, which resulted in about 6 emergency pediatric hospitalizations before I was 2.5. And so the order of the day for me growing up was basically fear of my life and survival from the very beginning. As I grew up, I was able to sustain things with a little bit of medicine, lots of illnesses though. If I got a cold or the flu, it would be a respiratory infection, it would go into my chest. In early adulthood, I had a belief that we can heal from anything, but it took me another few decades to get there. And I explored everything from holistic healing, the mind-body connection, the emotional connection, the spiritual connection, and nutrition, homeopathy, just about everything. And I do believe that they were all helpful, and they kept me from an adult life of being heavily medicated. But I was never able to get off of inhalers, which even on a good day, without a heavy exacerbation, I needed twice a day just to get by. And then fast forward to 2015, I was getting frequent shortness of breath. My mother had asthma, which developed into COPD, and had to take more and more medicine. Nothing I knew to do holistically was helping, but I knew if I went the traditional way, I could do it for a little while and then get better and come off. But this time, what I was used to have happening wasn't happening. So nothing was touching it. I couldn't breathe. They were telling me to go to a pulmonologist. They said I can't hear a wheeze. And one doctor said I had chronic fatigue because there is an adrenal connection with asthma. She put me to bed. So the whole spring of 2015, I was in bed. This went into the late summer. None of the medications were touching it, I revisited that fear of my life that I'd had since early infancy, and I really didn't think I was going to make it. And my intuition led me to a doctor I'd seen years before in San Francisco. I was too sick to go see him, and I was too weak, but I consulted with him over the phone. And one night, I was so afraid, because every night I didn't know if I was going to wake up the next morning. And I was trying to practice the unity principles, but I was too terrified. I couldn't let go of this fear. And it was the middle of the night, and this voice came through me, and it was a booming, strong, angry voice. And it said, "I am a child of God, and I do not inherit illness." And Tom thought I was possessed because of the sound of it was a scary, strong, angry voice. He ran out of the room. He didn't know what to make of it. And the next day, I was guided, as this doctor had told me, check out something called the Bateko method. And that next day, I learned a different way to breathe, and it saved my life. And it wasn't instant, and what I know today is even though my condition was respiratory, and this is a different way of breathing, it heals everything because of the way that it balances the gases and the carbon dioxide in our bodies. We come to a whole different state of balance and homeostasis that reverses all chronic disease. So it took me a while, but after that first experience of learning this method, I just knew that I was going to live. And that was a huge relief. And it was still a journey. I went through some very strong cleanses and detoxes as well. I lost 30 pounds. And I changed also the way that I ate. And primarily I ate a lot less. And I can now run, which I couldn't even do as a child. I can swim. And it was a process of about a year coming off of all those medications, and I would keep track on a legal pad how much of this I took, how much of that I took, how much of that, and then little zero with a line through it on the days I didn't have it. And every day I would faithfully, for months and even a year, be writing everything down. And then one day it occurred to me, every day I'm putting a zero down. I don't think I have to do this anymore. And even if Tom and I went for a gentle walk, I have to take my inhaler and have a pocket to put it in. I have one just in case of emergencies, but I don't even think about taking it with me anymore. And it's been over a year since that's been the case. So I feel like I've been given a new chance of life, and I'm very grateful. And because of that, they have asked me to join their team, and I'm apprenticing with them how to learn more about this method. And I've been blessed to observe many, many people as I watch the classes and observe to learn how many people have reversed amazing conditions. And they're held all over the world. It's an international organization, and it's not as well known in the States. But I'm hoping that more and more people can find out about this. So, because nobody has to suffer from any kind of chronic or degenerative illness. And you can start at any time. So, thank you. I hope that helped.
Thanks, Layla. Appreciate that. And if we have time, I've got some questions I'd like to dig a little bit deeper. So, Jackie.
Okay, real quick. How can I do this real
You got
quick?
plenty of time.
I can't. My journey, as Layla's, began 66 years ago. I was born with an allergy to a virus that I did not know that I had, and it's a common virus, and most women carry it in utero, and it's called cytomegalovirus. It's herpes virus number 10 or something, but I got that virus when I was born. I had no recollection or realization that I had anything going on with me until the 70s. My background is in theater. I have a master's in theater as well as a bachelor's, but I was getting ready to go into my master's program, and I had snuck into a ballet class at UC Irvine when I was in Southern California, and all of a sudden, I felt like my legs were disappearing. The next day, I couldn't walk. And I went into the hospital for 3 months. I was paralyzed completely from the waist down, partially from the waist up. Half of my face was paralyzed. And the illness is called Guillain-Barré. Is there anyone who, okay. It's not real well known, but according to the doctors, you will recover from Guillain-Barré and never ever be sick again with it. Well, no. So I was very lucky in the fact that I am a very tenacious woman, and I always have believed in my imagination, in my intuition, in the strength that I had as a person, that I would be able to persevere with whatever was going to happen to me. I learned early on when I was 26 and paralyzed that I was not my body. I was not only my body, I was so much more than my body. And learning that as a young life has served me throughout the rest of my life. In the 90s, the illness decided that it was going to take a turn, and it became acute and then chronic. I have been bedridden up to 3 years. I've been spent most of my time in a wheelchair. I had to change from having a vibrant life in theater. I opened a hit show that ran for 10 years in Sacramento called 6 Women with Brain Death. Anybody? Yippee! Yay! Anyway, I was forced to give up my career, and the doctors used to say to me, "Now, Jackie, you need to change your life." And I said, no, I'm an ocean liner, and I'm going in this direction, and you can't stop me. And I said, it's just like you're a doctor, and somebody says to you, you have to stop being a doctor now. So for 9 years after I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which at the time had no real name, no understanding, I ended up going to Washington, D.C. and advocating for the disorder in a wheelchair. I was convinced that the doctors knew absolutely nothing, therefore I had to figure everything out myself, which I embarked upon. I wrote a book, I did this, I did all these things, and I had fundraisers and I spoke, and all of it came to nothing, which was very interesting. And I finally had to say, okay, I will stop. And that was in 2008. And I, at that time, became bedridden for 3 years, finally came out of it 5 years later. I realized in this entire time that I had never been well more than 6 months of my life. And I did not have the tools, even though I was and have been and am an extremely creative individual and love my life. I had to give up everything that I thought was me, was Jackie Schultz. I had to give it all up. I had to give up my career. I had to give up everything that I learned in my education. I had to give up all my friends, because friends can't stay with you when you're in bed for a year. They have to go away. They don't stay. And I lost all my friends. I lost everything, basically. And I was at a place in my life where I wasn't sure exactly what was next. I started doing, I've always been a very empathetic, compassionate, loving woman that had a sense of spirit, but not really a personal relationship with God. I came to Capital City Unity. It'll be 3 years in August. I was led here by the Bensons. I became a care provider for Jack and Imogene Benson almost 3 years ago. And within the space of 4 months, I got called. I don't know how else to say it, but I woke up. It's the same kind of thing. I woke up and God said, "You're going to be a chaplain." And I was like, "What? Why? I had never had a sense of a personal relationship with God. I felt like I had a whole bunch of holes in my body, filled with fear and sadness and anger and possession and all kinds of things. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I have to be able to figure out how to fill all these holes that I felt I had because of my illness with something else. And because of all of you and because of this congregation, I have learned how to talk to myself in a whole new way with God every single day of my life. And it took a year and a half to get well. My mantra was every day, I am well, and I never said to any single cell of my body, there is no illness in this body, and you are not going to be sick again, ever. And this is 2 years later, and so for like 40 years, I had an illness all the time, and I had never been well this long. And I believe that it was a spiritual healing, and that it was 100% God and my participation with what God is. And I found that love here and that strength. And I can't tell you, I have no idea what's coming next in my life. None. Zero. I'm a care provider now, which I never was. I minister over at Eschaton. I spend my time practically ministering all day long, and I don't know why. So I'm not going to ask the question. I feel like it's an evolution in our lifetimes that we figure it out as we go. And with the guidance of God and all of you and that beautiful spirit that we get to feel each week, that we can all achieve that loving, gentle, kind relationship with God, no matter what happens to your body. I am not a believer that as we age, our bodies define who we are. It's our spirit and our love and our souls that define who we are.
Thank you. So we have a few more minutes. I would like to ask each of you the same question, if you're willing to take it on, which is, in the process, as you began to follow the new regime, as you took on the breathing shift, because to change the way I breathe has got to be a huge challenge, to do it completely differently, as you took on this belief in no sickness and no illness, did you ever have days where it just seemed like it wasn't going to work, it was impossible? And if so, how did you manage to overcome that?
Well, I never thought it was impossible. I believed it 100%, and that's why I jumped in all the way. It made so much sense to me. But the challenges came in terms of our family life, because Ben said, well, I could never eat like you. And I said, that's okay. Whatever, And we took 4 cruises after that, and people say, how can you go on a 50-day cruise and not get fat? And, well, you just don't go back the way you used to be. And all the sermons I've heard here in the past, they have helped me so much, and it makes so much sense here too, because we are what we believe, what we say comes to pass. We can materialize anything we want in our lives. The power is within us, and it's so exciting. So every day I just meditate, and then I'm like this little missionary, and I go to the gym, and I tell everybody in the sauna, and you think I'm here to exercise? No, I'm here to recruit you to your best health, But what better place to recruit people than at a gym where everybody wants to be their best anyway, but they think they can out-exercise the fork, but they can't. So no, I never had any doubt. I never questioned it. I was seeing continual success. And, one earlier time, I'd gone to my first doctor, and when I told him what I was doing, he said, oh, if I told people to eat like that, they would say that's not real food. And I said, I thought you were the doctor, And anyway, so no, it's just been 100%, and I haven't gained an ounce back, and now my high was 282, and now this morning it was 129, and who knows where it's going to end up, and it doesn't matter because I have found the way to eat for the rest of my life. And coming to church here every Sunday is the best thing that's happened to Ben and I. Phil married us 30 years ago this year, and it's home here. It's home. Thank you.
So what was the question?
In the process that you underwent to come to the place where you can now run when you never could before, was there any time when it felt dark and not easy to do, and how did you handle that?
No, the darkness lifted when I found this method. I knew I was led to it by God, and I knew that I was going to survive, and I knew that if I was going to be given another chance at life, that there was a purpose for me that was greater than my little life for me to do. I had discouraging moments when I would go through a detox. There were times that included a little bit of a revisitation of symptoms, and I would have little thoughts of, gee, is this really going to work for me, or does this happen with everybody? But they were very fleeting, and they were nothing like what occurred for me before this. And what I have to say is the people that I worked with are so amazingly supportive. They were more supportive of me than any local doctor that I ever saw, most of whom said, I can't handle this, I don't know what to do with you. You go off and see this pulmonologist or that person, but I'm not equipped to deal with you. So when you talked about friends leaving, I had that too. And I also had doctors saying, I'm done. These people who live all over the world, and I worked with them over Zoom, I could call them any time in the day or night, and they would make a house call and talk to me. And when I heard other people's processes who had been through similar things, and they shared with me their process, as soon as I knew, okay, this is part of the process, I'm good. And so I just went through it. And it was a gradual, over time, the detoxes got less severe, they got less frequent. I had more health in between times, and so it was a process like that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's Jackie.
I think my lowest period was when I was first diagnosed with the illness. I went to the head of neurology at UC Med Center, not to diss UC Med Center, and he said to me, and I dragged myself in there with 2 canes. I could not walk on my own. I had to hold up. Anyway, he said, no, you need to see a psychiatrist. And I thought to myself, okay, really? I'd never been on antidepressants. I knew I didn't need a psychiatrist. I had had therapy before in my life. I knew that this was not an imaginary illness. Doctors would call it conversion disorder, which is also something, a hysterical woman's disease, whatever. The name of it now is myalgic encephalomyelitis. Chronic fatigue syndrome is a misnomer to this extraordinary and very, very, very life-altering disorder that no one gets well from. So I consider my journey miraculous. When people asked me originally, how did you get well, all I could do was, because I don't know what to say, but when God truly came into my life, it just gave me the beginnings of tools that I didn't have. And I was always a spiritual person, but when I was bedridden, I had to live in a dark room, no stimulation whatsoever. Lots of people live in bed with blinders on and headphones on so that there is no noise. I had to black out all my windows, and I lived like that for years. But at the same time, I kept going. So the minute I would get well, I went back. So in answer to your question, I loved living. And I think that underneath everything else, if you love being alive and love yourself, I always liked me. I don't, it's like some people don't like themselves. And then I feel like if you really don't like your life, then it's not going to necessarily work out well. So that was a basis for me. And I never gave up. I thought I was going to die. And I started seeing angels and things. And I had to do it all on my own, which I think was the most difficult thing of all. I did find a community but I found the support community was not helpful in person. So I found a whole community of people with this illness online, and there are lots and lots of resources now. There's a lot of support, but it is very controversial. So I lived with doubt in who I was and what was happening to me for many, many years. That's why coming here and having this miracle is so life-changing.
Thank you, Jackie.